Institute of Personnel ARC conference, that's the Applied Research Conference 2021, and the Propel Showcase. So the Propel stands for Productivity Outcomes of Workplace Practice, Engagement and Learning. And in this particular little video, we're going to talk about managing workplace conflict competence, employee engagement and productivity. My name is Martin McCracken. I'm a senior lecturer and researcher in the area of HR and employment-based work, looking at in the Ulster University in Northern Ireland. I'm also a partner in the Propel Hub as well. And we are trying to really look at this issue of how some of the research which the other partners are doing can be disseminated in the Northern Ireland regional context. So obviously I'm joined here today with my two friends, my two academic friends here, who are going to be talking about the project which is linked to workplace conflict. So firstly, Professor Paul Latreille, and Paul leads the research project on conflict, competence, engagement and productivity. And this is obviously his role as Head of Work, Employment and Organisation at the University of Sheffield. Also, we've got Richard Saundry here, Professor Richard Saundry, who is a co-investigator on the Propel Hub project. And Richard, is the Professor of HR and Employee Relations at the University of Sheffield as well, and is one of the leading experts in workplace conflict in the United Kingdom. So in this showcase video, we want to try and give an insight into some of the work which the Propel Hub has been doing. And the taster sessions really will be something that we hope that you will enjoy as part of the ARC conference this year. So without further ado, firstly, Paul, can I turn to you, and can you tell us about the project and what the research is all about?
Yeah, it stems from a whole series of pieces that Richard and I have done over a number of years that have looked at workplace conflict. And one of the things that regularly comes out of those pieces of research, and that also comes out of the conversations we've had with HR practitioners, is a perception that line managers in particular often lack the capability and the confidence in dealing with problematic workplace issues, in particular in dealing with workplace conflict. There's a lot of evidence out in the literature, particularly by people like Bloom, Van Reenen and Sadun, around highlighting that we have a problem in the UK. Part of our issue in relation to the productivity gap, the productivity puzzle, is to do with the lack of capability among many line managers. And so there's very much, I think, a mix of skill levels. And our view was that one of the things that might be helpful in tackling that would be to develop a training intervention that we can use to upskill managers. And there's really a lack of evidence, I think, that around kind of whether that sort of training intervention works. So what we've been focused on is trying to develop a training intervention for these line managers that tackles some of the basic issues that are helpful in kind of fostering positive employee engagement and improving productivity. So this is very much like the other projects on the Hub, geared towards trying to tackle the productivity issue that's highlighted in the UK's industrial strategy.
Okay, so really, I mean, this is something that we see, I guess, day in, day out in workplaces up and down the land, this idea of line managers, supervisors really being confronted by real life, difficult situations, messy situations in terms of workplace conflict, and simply not having the tools to be able to deal with that. So that's the background of this. And again, I guess from my perspective, people talk about these issues of workplace conflict, but what are the implications of not getting this right for line managers?
I think it's a whole series of things. I mean, the one that we're particularly interested in here, the kind of the bottom line, as it were, is the productivity issue, that this is detrimental to productivity. But I think there's a whole host of other things that go along with that. So, there's evidence that suggests around a third of employees in any given year will be experiencing conflict. And many of those, as a consequence of that conflict, will experience high levels of stress, reduced levels of well-being, in the most severe cases, long-term sickness absence. So there's a whole raft of different issues that follow from that. We can see the lack of those skills being reflected perhaps in perceptions of unfairness in the treatment of people at work. And as I say, that ultimately this impacts on productivity via a whole kind of chain of things around things like well-being, lack of motivation, and so on.
I think if I could just as well just chip in here, is that one of the things that has been very apparent to us is that we've been researching this area for about probably a decade now. And when we first started looking at this area, this was something that was raised time and time again particularly by HR practitioners. And the research that we're doing now and have done over the last couple of years throws up exactly the same messages. So it's something that's known about, and I've probably quite a few of the people listening and watching this will be thinking, well, that's nothing new, and it isn't really. I mean, you go into any organisation and we start to talk about the same problems, but despite knowing about it, for some reason, the problem isn't really being addressed. And I think there's quite often an overemphasis on training managers to deal with some of the more compliance-based issues around procedure. I think that sometimes some of the skills that are needed to manage conflict are sort of denigrated a bit and talked about as soft skills, where they're actually quite complex and they're quite difficult to use. They're not easy to learn. They're not easy to develop. And also, I think within organizations themselves, there's a reluctance to really take it seriously. And I think that over the past sort of 5-10 years, everybody's loved talking about leadership. So senior managers in organizations love leadership programs. And one of the things that some of the research that people like Nick Bloom and John Van Rieden and Raphael Assadun have suggested is that the problem is that's great. But unless you have people who have some excellence in some of the more operational managerial skills, that leadership capability is pretty pointless, really. And therefore, because leadership is this thing which really is hoovered up a lot of resources, the bit that's been missing is the bit in the middle, which is the ability of managers just to have quality conversations with their staff. So at one level, it's nothing particularly revolutionary, but it's something that, particularly in the UK, we just don't seem to be able to get right.
Yeah, I mean, certainly whenever you're talking there, Richard, I was thinking about some of the teaching which I do in terms of leadership versus management. And it's certainly true what you're saying. I mean, leadership is that kind of leadership programs, and it's the sexy thing that everyone wants to go in those programs. But really at the center of everything is management and managing people effectively. And that's where this idea of conflict really comes in. So, I mean, I wonder, could you tell us a little bit more about some of the specifics of the learning intervention that you were proposing to? Now, I know COVID is obviously
absolutely
big time on this, because you were looking at a face-to-face training intervention and trying to evaluate that and understand how that could really make a difference. But could you just give us a little bit about the actual intervention?
Yeah, sure. So we started up with work. It's also important to point out that one of the project partners is Acas, the Advisory Conciliation Arbitration Service, who obviously have a wealth of expertise in this area and have been sort of developing managerial skills in terms of conflict, for a number of years. So we've been greatly informed by some of their sort of senior advisors we've talked to at great length, and we've talked to a whole range of different people trying to get an idea about what are the key skills. The interesting thing that from that initial piece of research is that the key skills are probably, again, fairly unsurprising. So they are sort of good listening skills, good questioning skills, the ability to negotiate, I would say the ability to mediate with a very small m. We're not thinking of that all managers should be accredited trained mediators, but the ability to sort of bring people together who might be in conflict, to focus on people's interests and needs rather than positions. These types of things, which for anybody who's either delivered some of this training in the past or has gone on some of this training, again, won't be particularly new. So we sort of, I think we, from quite an early stage, realised we had to focus on what we might call the classics, really. I mean, these are sort of classical skills, but they're things which we still don't develop very well. So we worked quite closely with Acas. We developed a face-to-face training, one-day training program. We were also going to develop a 2-day training program for more senior managers, with the idea that one of the problems that managers have is getting support from their senior managers. So again, one of the ideas is that we wanted to see what difference it made if we had senior managers who were also upskilled in this area as well. And we were just about ready to go back in February. I can't remember the exact date, probably early March, and obviously COVID hit. And therefore, we've spent the last sort of 9 months or so first of all, deciding whether we needed to switch our approach. And we talked to a lot of people about this, and quite a few people were concerned about the fact that with online delivery, you tend to lose some of the cohort effects and the sort of the peer learning. And people quite enjoy the sort of role play element to some of these types of training courses. But eventually we decided we didn't really have a choice. And I think what's happened, which is quite interesting as a result of this, is that I think what we've been able to develop, and we have now developed a sort of a prototype of the training, is something which is very different and much more innovative. And I think we have a fairly innovative online offering. It's sort of a blended offering, so it's not sort of your classic, we've all done health and safety training and, when we start a new job. So it's a little bit more than that. There's quite a lot of instructor and student interaction. There's a whole range of sort of activities there. And I think I suppose if I had to focus on one particular aspect of this, is that we want to try to give managers a resource as well as a sort of a skills development program. Because one of the things, again, which I've delivered some of this training in the past, and I've been on some of these courses, and I think the feedback you tend to get is the students really enjoy it, they find it really useful. But I think if you go back and talk to those students 3 months later or 6 months later, say, have you actually used any of this stuff? Then you get a bit of a different answer, because people aren't dealing with conflict every day of the week, particularly more complex things. So I think what we wanted to do is to give sort of delegates and the people we're working with access to resources which they can actually use when they are in a difficult situation. And so that's what we're trying to do. So we are hoping that when we start to roll out the project, that those delegates and students who work with us, that they'll have an initial training program, and then they will have access to some of those materials and some of those resources for a longer period. And crucially, we're doing something which hasn't really been done in this area before, is that we are going to be evaluating the impact of that. And we think that's really important, because going back to what we were saying earlier, I think part of the problem that HR practitioners have is really selling the idea of investing in these skills to senior managers. And we want to see whether they work. So we're not just going to be doing a quick before and after study, but we're going to be using a sort of randomized controlled trial approach to get some really robust quantitative evidence as to whether this type of intervention really has an impact on engagement and productivity.
Okay. Just on the wider kind of thing, I'm picking up from what you said there, Richard, as well, the fact that you're looking at the senior managers and line managers. Are they both part of was the plan to have both of them in the actual training and intervention as well, or just try and support?
So I think it's going. I think we're within some of the organisations will have this sort of additional treatment, if you like, and the additional treatment will be the addition of senior managers. We want to see what works here.
Yeah.
And we'll be piloting, I think, Paul, over the next month or so. Over the next couple of months, and refining the intervention as a result of that. But I think what we're hoping for is that we have a basic treatment, which is a skills intervention program for line managers. And then in some organisations, we're going to be trialling this additional extra, if you like, which to see whether that really makes a difference. Because our sort of hypothesis would be that it probably does, is that one of the problems of just training your line managers and leaving the senior managers out of it is you assume the senior managers have these skills. Yeah. And also you assume HR practitioners have these skills. And, I know some do, but with the best will in the world, I think that I think some of the deficits we see, the skills deficits are not just among line managers. So I think that's what we're aiming to do.
And I think just to add that senior manager element of it is also important, because one of the things I think that was highlighted to us both by the assessors when we submitted the original bid, but has also emerged from conversations with stakeholders, is that the cultural piece is really important in terms of delivering change. And so actually you need those senior managers, the leaders, if you like, to be part of the conversation and to say, this is important, this is something we have to tackle and we have to do.
Yeah.
I think that's actually not a bad way for us if we're thinking about wrapping this up. It's really about getting this into the fabric, the culture of the organisation, And you're talking about, there's so many kind of things that occur to me when you're speaking there. This idea of kind of transfer of skills, transfer of learning, the kind of use it or lose it type of thing. And this is one of the kind of key problems which we will have with the conflict, as you said quite rightly. People don't face this every day. They do face these issues and the tendency for them to blow up. And I think what's important for me and what's really interesting about this is you're almost trying to stop this in its tracks before it really does impact negatively on the productivity of the organization. And if we can get to the heart of that within this research, then it's going to be tremendously beneficial when you think, and looking, and I guess maybe, for practicing managers, what they will really want to know is, what are the kind of baseline skills which I need to have in my locker going forward? And I think that's what that research will do.
I think fundamentally for us, we believe that the skills that you need to resolve a difficult conflict which is blown up in a workplace are very relevant in any aspect of your managerial life. So if we can equip people with the ability to resolve some really difficult issues, if they take that just into their how they interact on a day-to-day basis with their staff, then you'll prevent a lot of the conflict from either occurring or escalating in the first place. So I think that there's a bigger win than just resolving the odd really difficult problem that comes along. It's about giving people the skills so that they can be good managers. I mean, that's what it comes down to.
I think it's no it's no accident that the subtitle of the project is actually about positive conversations, and I think that's a real takeaway from this. It's about more than just dealing with problems. It's about having positive conversations.
Okay, well, Richard and Paul, I think we're just up to our time here, and I would like to thank you for telling us about the project. Really, really fascinating. And again, whenever you get to the heart of it and talk about the kind of specifics of the intervention and why you're doing the research and why it's taking place, you can really see the wider implications and the impact it can have for productivity on workplaces. And I think it's really kind of interesting, this idea of almost prevention is better than cure. And that's very much what this project and this research seems to be all about. So once again, thank you very much. And
thank
again,
you.
To hear more about the research as it unfolds. Thank you very much again.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.